If you are taking blood pressure medication every single day and still feel a quiet fear about what your numbers will be tomorrow morning, you need to hear this clearly. Something deeper may be driving your condition, and it may not be what you have been told. Because if your treatment were truly fixing the problem, your blood pressure would not rise the moment you miss a single dose. It would not slowly creep back up after a few months, and you would not live with that constant uncertainty. The feeling that you are controlling something on the surface while it continues to move underneath you. That is not failure. That is a signal most people ignore. A few years ago, a 72-year-old man sat across from me in my office, and what stood out was not his condition, but his discipline. 4 medications every morning, taken on time, without exception. He tracked his numbers in a small notebook, line after line, trying to understand a pattern that never made sense. He adjusted his diet. He followed every instruction he had been given. And still, his blood pressure remained high. Not occasionally, not unpredictably, consistently. When I asked him how long he had been dealing with this, he paused and said something simple but heavy. "I feel like I'm doing everything right, but it's not working." That sentence is not about numbers. It is about trust. It is about the moment a person begins to question whether their body is still on their side. So I asked him what he was most afraid of, and his answer came quickly. He said, "I'm afraid I won't see it coming." He was talking about a stroke, the kind of event that changes everything without warning. That is the fear behind this condition. We reviewed everything. His medications were correct. His routine was consistent. On paper, nothing looked wrong, and yet nothing was improving. So I asked him one more question. What were his numbers first thing in the morning, before anything else? He told me they were already high. That is when he looked at me and asked quietly, "Doctor, is my body just broken?" And before I answered him, "You need to consider this, because the answer may change everything." The answer to that question is no, and understanding why requires a shift that most people are never given. High blood pressure is not simply a problem of the heart. It is not just about how hard your heart is pumping or how narrow your blood vessels have become. Those are the visible effects, not the true source. The deeper issue is control. Your heart and your blood vessels do not act on their own. They respond to instructions, moment by moment, from a system designed to keep you alive. When that system is set incorrectly, everything downstream follows that instruction, no matter how many medications you take or how carefully you follow your routine. Think about it this way. You would never try to fix the temperature in your home by replacing parts inside the system while ignoring the thermostat on the wall. If the thermostat is set too high, the system will keep producing heat regardless of what you do to the mechanical components. The same principle applies here. Your cardiovascular system is not failing. It is responding to a setting that has been pushed too high over time and has stayed there long enough that your body now treats it as normal. That is the reframe most people have never been given. And once you see it, it becomes impossible to ignore. I'm not telling you this as a theory or something abstract. I'm telling you this after more than 30 years working as a cardiac surgeon, seeing patients at every stage of this condition. I have been in operating rooms where the damage could not be reversed, and I have had conversations with families that no one ever wants to have. But I have also spent years asking a different question, one that is often overlooked. Why do so many people reach that point, even when they were following medical advice? Because most patients are not careless. They are consistent. They take their medication. They attend their appointments. They try to do everything right, and yet something still does not fully resolve. That is what led me to look beyond the surface, beyond the idea that this is only a mechanical issue, and toward the system that is actually giving the commands. And once you begin to see it from that perspective, a much more important question emerges. To understand what is really happening, you have to move beyond the idea that blood pressure is only about force and resistance, because that explanation leaves out the most important part of the system. Yes, your heart pumps blood. Yes, your arteries carry it. And yes, medications can slow the pump or relax the vessels. But none of that explains who is deciding how fast your heart should beat or who is instructing your blood vessels when to tighten and when to relax. Those decisions are not random. They are being made continuously, every second of your life. by a control system that sits above everything else. Deep within your brainstem, there is a region known as the rostroventrolateral medulla. You do not feel it, and you do not consciously control it, but it plays a central role in regulating your blood pressure. Its function is to receive information from your body, interpret that information, and send signals that determine how your cardiovascular system responds. In practical terms, it acts like a thermostat, constantly adjusting the level of pressure your body maintains, not in a vague sense, but in a precise, moment-to-moment process that never stops. Whether you are awake or asleep, in a healthy system, this thermostat is flexible. When you stand up quickly, your blood pressure rises just enough to prevent dizziness. When you exercise, your heart rate increases to meet demand. When you encounter stress, your body prepares for action. And when those moments pass, the system returns to a calmer state. The thermostat turns up when needed and turns back down when it is no longer necessary. That constant movement is what keeps your system stable. The problem begins when that flexibility starts to fade. Over time, especially after the age of 60, the signals feeding into this control center begin to change. Years of stress, poor sleep, inflammation, and metabolic shifts do not create a sudden failure, but they do create a gradual recalibration. The baseline setting of the system begins to move upward. At first, the change is subtle. Your blood pressure may rise slightly, not enough to cause alarm, but your body adapts to this new level and begins to treat it as normal. Instead of returning fully to a lower state during rest, the system maintains a higher baseline even when there is no external demand. Eventually, in many people, the thermostat becomes biased toward that higher setting. It continues to send signals that keep blood vessels slightly constricted and the heart working harder than necessary, even during periods of rest. This is why some people wake up in the morning, before any stress has entered their day, and find that their blood pressure is already elevated. Nothing has triggered it externally. The system itself is holding that level in place. But the control system does not operate alone. It depends on accurate information to function properly. Your body has specialized sensors embedded within your arteries that detect changes in blood pressure and send that information back to the brainstem. These sensors are known as baroreceptors, and they are located in key areas such as the carotid arteries and the aorta. Their job is to measure pressure and provide feedback so the control center can make the right adjustments. In a younger system, these sensors work efficiently because the arterial walls can expand and contract easily. That flexibility allows them to detect even small changes in pressure and send accurate signals. However, as part of the natural aging process, the arteries gradually become stiffer. When the walls lose elasticity, the sensors embedded within them lose sensitivity. They no longer stretch as effectively, which means they no longer report pressure accurately. This creates a critical problem. The control center relies on these signals to determine whether your blood pressure is too high or too low. If the sensors are underreporting the actual pressure, the brain receives incomplete information. It interprets that information as meaning the pressure is lower than it truly is. In response, it sends signals to increase the pressure in order to reach what it believes is the correct level. Now consider what this means. The thermostat is already set too high, and at the same time it is receiving inaccurate feedback that encourages it to push even higher. Your body is not malfunctioning randomly. It is following instructions based on distorted data. This creates a self-reinforcing loop, where the system maintains elevated pressure even when there is no real need for it. Once you understand this, the patterns many people experience begin to make sense. The elevated readings in the morning, the gradual increase over time, the need for higher doses of medication. These are not random problems. They are predictable outcomes of a system that has been reset to operate at the wrong level. And that leads to a critical realization that changes everything moving forward. This is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable, because it forces you to question something you have trusted for years. Blood pressure medications are not wrong. They are not harmful when used appropriately. In many cases, they are necessary, and they save lives every single day. Treatments for hypertension can lower your numbers, reduce immediate risk, and help prevent serious events in the short term. That part is real, and it matters. But there is another part of the story that most people are never clearly told, and it is the reason so many patients feel like they are stuck managing the condition rather than truly resolving it. Most medications are designed to work on the output of the system, not the system that is giving the commands. They influence what your heart and blood vessels are doing, but they do not change the instructions coming from the control center in your brain. And over time, your body begins to respond to that difference. The system is not passive, it is adaptive. When medication lowers your blood pressure from the outside, the brain detects that change and begins to compensate. It increases sympathetic nerve activity. It signals the kidneys to retain more sodium. It adjusts hormonal pathways to bring the pressure back toward the level it has learned to maintain. This is not a failure of treatment, and it is not a failure of your body. It is a survival response. Your system is trying to preserve what it believes is normal, even if that normal is now too high. And this is where many people begin to feel something they cannot fully explain. You take the medication, and the numbers improve. For a while, it feels like progress. But then something changes. The same dose becomes less effective. Another medication is added. The numbers drop again, and then slowly begin to rise once more. It is not a sudden breakdown. It is a quiet resistance. You may have experienced this yourself. The sense that you are doing everything correctly, yet something underneath is pushing back. Not aggressively, but consistently. That is not your imagination. That is your body adapting to maintain the pattern it has been set to follow. So the question is no longer just whether medication works. The question is whether it is addressing the full picture. If the control system remains set too high, and if it continues to adapt in response to external changes, then increasing the dose or adding more medication may only manage the surface. It may not change the underlying pattern. And once you begin to see that clearly, a much more important question begins to form. That question leads to a completely different way of approaching this problem. Because the answer is yes, the system can change, but only if you begin working with it instead of only trying to suppress its output. The same control system that has adapted in a way that keeps your blood pressure elevated is also capable of adapting in the opposite direction when it receives the right kind of input. This is not guesswork. It is based on how your autonomic nervous system functions. Your body is constantly balancing two forces. One increases pressure and prepares you for action. The other slows things down and allows your system to recover. In many people living with hypertension, that balance has shifted. The system that raises pressure is overactive, and the system that lowers it is underused. The goal is not to force your body down from the outside, but to activate the pathway that naturally brings it back into balance. There are specific techniques that can do this, and they work because they send direct signals into the same control pathways that regulate your blood pressure at its source. The first technique is immediate and practical. It is something you can use the moment you feel your pressure rising. You may notice a sense of tension, a pressure behind your eyes, or a subtle awareness that your body is becoming activated. In that moment, you can use a point on your hand to send a calming signal through your nervous system. Look at the area between your thumb and your index finger. That soft web of tissue is rich in nerve endings connected to pathways that influence the brainstem. To use it, take your opposite hand and press firmly into that area. The pressure should be strong but controlled, not sharp or painful. Hold it for about 30 seconds while breathing normally. Do not hold your breath. Keep your breathing slow and steady. As you maintain that pressure, signals travel through the nervous system and help reduce sympathetic activity. In simple terms, you are telling your body to ease off. Many people feel a dull ache or a spreading warmth, which is a normal response. Within minutes, this can help bring your pressure down slightly. This is not a long-term solution, but it is a reliable tool for moments when your system begins to escalate. The second technique is where the long-term change begins, and this is where consistency becomes essential. It is called isometric hand grip training. It has been studied in individuals with persistent high blood pressure and has shown measurable results over time. You do not need any specialized equipment. A rolled towel or a simple grip device is enough. Sit comfortably, keep your shoulders relaxed, and begin with one hand. Squeeze the object at about 30% of your maximum strength. This is important. It should feel controlled, not strained. Hold the squeeze for 30 seconds, then release completely and rest for 30 seconds. That is one cycle. Complete 4 cycles with one hand. Then switch to the other hand and repeat. Throughout the entire process, your breathing must remain steady. This is critical. Holding your breath can cause a sharp increase in pressure, which is exactly what you want to avoid. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth in a slow, controlled rhythm. The full session takes about 12 minutes. It is simple, repeatable, and designed to fit into your daily routine without difficulty. What is happening inside your body during this process is what makes it powerful. When you squeeze, blood flow to the muscle is briefly reduced. When you release, there is a surge of blood back into the tissue. This process stimulates the inner lining of your blood vessels, known as the endothelium, to produce a molecule called nitric oxide. This molecule plays a key role in relaxing blood vessels, not just in your hand, but throughout your entire system. The immediate effect is improved vessel relaxation, but the long-term effect is even more important. With consistent practice, your blood vessels become more responsive, and your internal pressure sensors begin to function more accurately again. The signals being sent back to your brain become clearer, and the control system can begin to recalibrate. You are not forcing your blood pressure down. You are helping your body relearn how to regulate it properly. To make this work, you need a consistent routine. Perform this exercise twice a day. Once in the morning, within the first 30 minutes after waking, before coffee, before checking your phone, then again in the evening, about an hour before sleep. After each session, take a moment to measure your blood pressure and write it down. This is not about perfection. It is about awareness and consistency. In the first 1 or 2 weeks, you may not notice major changes. That is normal. By weeks 3 and 4, many people begin to see more stable readings. By weeks 5 and 6, fluctuations often decrease. By 8 weeks, the changes can become clearly measurable. Not because you forced your system, but because you trained it. This is not about replacing medication. It is about finally addressing the part of the system that medication alone does not reach. And once you begin to see that shift, your entire experience with managing blood pressure starts to change. It becomes less about reacting and more about understanding, less about uncertainty and more about control, which leads directly into what truly matters next. 8 weeks later, that same 72-year-old man came back into my office, sat down, and quietly placed his notebook on the table. He didn't say a word at first. He simply turned it toward me. Page after page of readings, steady, consistent, no longer unpredictable. His morning numbers had dropped into a range he had not seen in years. 128/82. And what mattered even more than the numbers was the look on his face. It wasn't excitement. It was relief. Not the kind that comes from a temporary fix, but the kind that comes from understanding what is actually happening inside your body. He looked at me and said something simple. So my body wasn't broken. It just needed the right signals. And that is the truth I want you to remember. Your body is not working against you. It has been responding to the instructions it receives, even when those instructions were not in your favor. When those signals begin to change, your body can change with them. So here is what matters now. Do not let this be something you just listen to and move on from. Take what you have learned and apply it. Start the routine. Track your numbers. Give your body the consistency it needs to respond. Because change does not come from knowing. It comes from doing. If this gave you a new way of seeing your condition, I want you to tell me, have you ever been told that your body could help regulate its own blood pressure like this? Leave a comment and share your experience. And if you know someone who has been struggling with this quietly for years, send this video to them. It may be exactly what they need to hear. Save this video so you can come back and follow the steps again. And subscribe to the channel for more clear, practical insights that help you understand your body and take back control of your health.